We have in this week's Parsha a very interesting pasuk. When it's time for Aaron, the Kohen Gadol, to bring special offerings on his first day of service in the Mishkan, Moshe says to him, Krav, come close to the altar. And various midrashim talk about the fact that Moshe had to urge Aaron to come forward. And the two most famous midrashim, to the best of my knowledge, is one cited by Rashi. Rashi basically says the medrash that Aaron saw an image that evoked recollections of the golden calf to him at the Mizbeach, at the altar. And Aaron was tremendously reluctant to go forward because how can I go and bring these offerings on behalf of myself, the Jewish people, after I've had this terrible role in the sin of the golden calf? And Moshe says to him, go forward, you can do it. There's another medrash cited by the Ramban. The Ramban cites the medrash that gives a mashal, gives a parable, that there was a woman who had just married the king, and it was time for her to go into the king. And she was very reluctant to go into the king. And her sister said to her, Hagas datech, you have to be a little bit haughty. The reason why you married the king was to interact with him, and you've got to go in. So too, says the medrash, Aaron was reluctant to go in to serve God in the Mishkan and bring the offerings on behalf of the Jewish people. And Moshe's brother said to him, Hagas datka, you have to think highly of yourself and go in and do it. Clearly, both of these midrashim are addressing a sense of not being worthy. And the truth is we grapple with this a lot in our lives, whether it be in our relationships with God, whether it be in our relationship with other people. I've done this, I've done that. Who am I to do this? Who am I to do that? How could I be so brazen? And sometimes we need to nudge ourselves or someone else needs to nudge us. And sometimes we have to have a little bit more confidence. Hagas datra. Moshe Feinstein makes a very interesting observation regarding the second medrash, the parable involving the spouse of the king. And he says that there's a very deep point being conveyed in that medrash. It's not just a cute mashal. You know, many of us, if we felt that we've been not up to snuff in our service of God, we might be reluctant to represent the nation in some way, to do a mitzvah in some way, because we might think to ourselves, who am I? And many times the response that we need to say back to ourselves is, no, you still have an obligation. God is still interested in your mitzvahs, etc. But Moshe says that the message of this parable is not just God is interested in you. God is like our spouse. God loves us. It's not just that we're acceptable to God. It's not just that we have a mission before God. God loves us. And that's a very important piece to think about. That God knows our shortcomings. God is a fair judge. But besides all of that, imagine a parent, a child, maybe even more, a spouse to another spouse, a dear friend that desperately wants us to succeed and so strongly sees our goodness. If that we only tap into it ourselves, that's how God views us. We always need to remember that. Have a wonderful Shabbos.